Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. Hope you're all doing good. Shading. Finally doing this video. I know you guys have been waiting a long time for this video. Just a bit. I actually did record a drawing that I shaded off stream for a shading tutorial, but I scrapped it because I didn't really explain anything that well. It wasn't a good video, so I got rid of it. So I'm going to try to make this one better. This video is going to be my way of shading and some basics. If you've been here for a bit, you would know that I do a lot of Berserk drawings. Just a few. Anyway, this will sort of be going over Berserk style slightly, because I guess my style is highly influenced by Berserk's, and I think you'll see that in the drawing we did today. Also, I wanted to say this before we get into talking about shading and all that. If you don't know what you want your style to be, you need to go find some sort of base. My biggest art advice for finding a style to draw with is to go with whatever you think looks good. It's totally your choice, your opinion. For example, I love Berserk style, so I drew Berserk panels for 2 years like a psychopath. That doesn't mean you need to draw panels at the same style for 2 years. You do want a good amount of time put into whatever style you're trying to recreate or use, whatever. I wasn't just drawing those panels just because they look cool. I was breaking each panel down and trying to figure out how Kentaro made everything work. And by breaking down each panel, redrawing it, I was able to see patterns in the art and how he shaded everything. Then all I did after that was just use whatever I learned and put it into my own drawings. Now, it doesn't have to be the exact same style. You can always add your own twist into the style. In fact, you should add your own twist into the style once you understand it enough. So Berserk's art style is the base of my art style. I change slight things here and there when I draw, but the overall basis for the way I shade comes from Berserk. Again, try to find something you like. It doesn't have to be Berserk or Vagabond or some crazy complicated style. I just happen to choose Berserk because it looks cool as fuck. So, I don't know. Anyway, to summarize everything I just said, I'm going to put up a little visual. So here we go, this is you. It has no style, wants to find one. So you explore styles of all sorts, whatever that might be. So like Vagabond, One Piece, whatever the hell you like. Choose one you like, or choose multiple, you can always combine them. Draw some panels of whatever you choose, try to break down the style as you draw it, so it becomes more of a process in your mind. Once you've drawn enough and understand the style, try to use it for like your own original drawings. Then you can alter it and do whatever the hell you want with it. That's pretty much what I do. That's all I actually did. So, yeah, it's my advice on finding a style. Is it good advice? I don't know, worked for me. So as past Ethan does the sketch and outline, we're going to talk about some basic shading techniques. Also, this whole video only goes over black and white shading, because I don't do color drawings yet. So yeah, let's get started. Well, there's something called hatching and cross-hatching, which is used in every single manga that I've ever seen. I don't think there's a single manga that doesn't use them, so that's how you shade. Unless you just shade with, like, screen tones, that's a whole different thing. Cross-hatching and hatching are the two techniques we're really going to be using a lot of in this video. Like, a lot of. So let's go over them real fast. They're really simple. Alright, so the first one is hatching. Hatching is the base for pretty much all shading in manga. It's really the most simple way of shading. It's just a bunch of parallel lines that are really close together, express shadow, texture, or value. The closer they are, the darker. The farther apart they are, the lighter. It also usually consists of one set of lines. Pretty simple stuff. The second technique is cross-hatching. Cross-hatching is pretty much the same as hatching, except you add some more lines to the first row of lines. Usually, when you cross-hatch, you're going to make like X shapes, and it's using darker areas for whatever you're shading. But it doesn't always have to be an X shape. There's so many ways you can use cross-hatching, so many different styles and uses. It doesn't have to just be two lines overlapping each other. It can be as many as you want, to be honest. I do some pretty crazy cross-hatching for the cape of the guy on the left, like later in the video. I'll go more in depth when we get to that part. Cross-hatching also doesn't have to be a diagonal. It can be straight lines, it can be curved lines, it can be really whatever. Yeah. That goes for hatching as well. It doesn't have to be straight. It's actually insane how many textures and uses you can create and find with cross-hatching. For example, the Miyamoto Musashi Vagabond drawing we did on stream a few months ago. I didn't know how to shade the top of his gi. So I spent like 20 minutes just sitting there thinking about how I would cross-hatch it. And some people in chat were saying that he used screen tones for his gi and didn't ink it by hand. I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know how he drew half of that stuff because he's insane. But it didn't matter anyway because I don't have screen tones on hand because they're expensive as a fuck. So I had to figure it out. I ended up doing like 3 or 4 layers of cross-hatching to make it look like the original. I actually loved it so much. I loved how it turned out so much that I still use that same method I created for other characters I made. All cross-hatching is and shading is really just trial and error. You gotta experiment with a lot of that stuff. You know, to like really start understanding what would look good here, what would look good there, you know, what to do and what not to do. It's really just practice. That's really all art is. Just a shit ton of time and practice. Alright, so we have a finished sketch here. I actually do change some things later on, like the faces, but for now they just stay the same. I fully outlined my drawings before I shade, so that's what we're gonna do. There is something you should do before shading with the dipping pen though. You should probably use one of these. This is a kneaded eraser, and it's basically a flexible eraser you've used to just take off most of the pencil lead. All it really does is make the pencil lines a lot lighter, and it makes inking a lot easier. It doesn't fully erase the sketch as long as you don't go over it too much, but I would definitely say to get one of these if you're planning on using a dipping pen, because they make it so much easier to ink with. It's actually insane. But to use this, all you do is roll it over the paper. That's really it. The harder you press, the more it will take off, and the lighter the sketch will be. If you sketch lightly, you probably shouldn't press too hard if you're going to use one of these. But if you sketch like me, sometimes I do light sketches, sometimes I do thicker sketches. This is probably one of the thicker sketches I do. I was pressing kind of hard when I was doing this. That's why the camera's shaking and shit. After you finish doing that, we're going to grab our dipping pen, or Gpen, or whatever you want to call it. I call it the same thing. We're just going to grab our ink. This is the Gpen I use. It's a Tachikawa Gpen, which is the brand I always use. I found Tachikawa to work the best out of like all the other ones I used. The first few dipping pens I bought, they didn't really work that well. And then I learned about Tachikawa. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll try these out. They definitely work the best. The ink I use is Deleter 4 black ink, and I gotta say this ink flows so nicely. It's insane. I love using this. Anyway, when you use a dipping pen, you don't want to put a whole ton of ink on it. This is pretty crucial because if you put too much ink on it, then, well, 1, you're wasting ink, and 2, it could end up spilling from the tip. Found the ideal spot for me to go up to is a little bit before the hole in the middle of the dipping pen, or the pen nib, which is like that silver part you put the ink on. It doesn't overflow, and it seems to hold on enough for a good usage. So, also, when using a dipping pen, this is pretty important, so pay attention to this if anything. Make sure you ink from the opposite side of your dominant hand. So if you're right-handed like me, you should start inking from the left and go to the right, so you don't accidentally smear the ink and ruin the drawing, because I have done that so many times, and it's just aggravating, frustrating. The same goes for wrong-handed people, I mean left-handed people. You should ink from the right to the left. I know the first time I tried using a dipping pen, I had no idea like how much to put on it. Some people say to dip it in past the oval in the pen nib, but I say that's stupid because whenever I do it, it just ends up being a waste of ink, so I don't know, it never really worked for me. One of the arguments I heard for that was it stores the ink up there. Whenever I tried doing it, it would just sit there and wouldn't flow because the ink below it would dry, and it's like, well, now you can't do anything with this. You gotta use a tissue to get it off. It's just a waste. That's why I say dip it in a little bit before that oval. Yeah, you'll constantly need to dip it back in the ink, but it's better than wasting a ton of ink, to be honest. Now, you might notice when I ink that I sort of ignore that entire ink rule from left to right deal. I kind of ignore that. That's because I ink drawings very randomly. For the most part, I do actually follow that rule, or at least try to. My brain likes to break that rule a lot, so sometimes I just don't. Sometimes I just ink very randomly, which you'll probably see in this. I forget if I actually do or not. There's also something called line weight, which is pretty much how thick a line is. I don't know too much about line weight, but you are supposed to make the lines thicker depending on how much light is hitting that area. So for example, let's say you have a box, and the left side of that box is your light source. Obviously the left side of that box would be lighter and the right side would be darker because obviously no light's hitting it. Now the line weight could have an effect on both sides, technically. You should have whatever side the light is hitting to be thinner, and whatever side the light is not hitting to be thicker. So in this case, the left side would have a thinner line, and the right side would have a thicker line. You would still shade it the same, but it can have a better effect on the overall drawing. Now you could totally ignore this rule like I do for most of the time because I forget about it, but it does make a difference, slightly. It's not a huge difference, but it can look nicer than if you make all the lines the same. Now I don't actually do this in the drawing, but I did want to talk about it because it's pretty important. The whole line weight thing. Also, dipping pens have their disadvantages sometimes. For example, whenever I use a ruler with a dipping pen, it always smears the ink, and it just does not go well. I know I'm not using it the right way, but I've messed up so many drawings by just trying to use a ruler and a dipping pen, and it just doesn't work. So I don't even bother risking it anymore. That's why I have a micron here instead of a dipping pen in this clip for the sword, because I don't want to risk it. I actually do smear some of the ink later. And here I'm just finishing up the sword, doing the hilt and all that, giving it a few details. I think the next thing I do is the faces, so probably talk more about that in a bit. So I try to be very careful when outlining faces, because you don't want to press too hard with the dipping pen. If you didn't know, pressing harder with a dipping pen actually gives it a thicker line, so I don't really like to do that for faces. I like to have thin lines for the face, so I can't really draw them that fast. Yeah, you could use a different size pen nib. I actually do have a smaller pen nib, but I don't think I use it here, because I've done it before where I outline with the medium one, and then I'll do like the facial features with the smaller one. It just looks weird. It doesn't look great. So, I don't know. I just decided not to use it for this drawing. So for this guy's hair, I usually use the large pen nib, but I decided to use a medium one since it's a pretty small area. I don't really need to use the large one for his head this time. I could make it look more detailed if I used a smaller one, so that's why I used it. But in the manga I'm making, I use a large pen nib for his hair most of the time. It's like a big panel or whatever. So after I finish doing the whole outline, I usually erase all the pencil marks from the sketch, so the shading will look better. Sometimes I forget to ink some parts, like his pants here, so I have to go back and like constantly outline. Just like for the parts I forgot. After that, I just finish erasing the whole page, making sure I get rid of all the pencil marks from, the original sketch, because I don't need it anymore. I already have the outline. So now that the whole outline's done, I can go ahead and actually start the shading process. 18 minutes later into the video. Anyway, I'm still editing this while doing voiceovers, so I already know it's gonna be a long video. I'm sorry about that. I still have so much footage, even this far into the video. But I hope it helps in the end, so now I'm gonna start shading the cape. Basically, I'm gonna do that shading method I was talking about earlier. So first I'll start with the cape near his neck, and then work my way down the side. So how I decided to shade the cape is to go over it in layers. So this is the first layer, where I shade the whole thing with curved lines. Now, I want to keep the lines curved with how the fabric would be folded. It just looks better, instead of just straight lines shading. So the closer it gets to the middle of each part where it folds, it would get straighter, the lines for shading, and the farther away from the middle it would be more curved. I also try to keep them pretty close together, since his cape is like a dark navy blue in my mind, but obviously you can't use colors in manga, so I have to create a shade with cross-hatching. I think it does a good enough job. So like I said earlier, when we were talking about cross-hatching, the closer the lines are together, the darker, and the further apart they are, the lighter. And as I go farther down the right side, I have to think about, how the cloth would fold, what the lines would look like. So each part would have a different curved line. I may add tweaking this shading style a bit later on. But for now I'm going to keep it the same, because I don't know, I like how it is right now. I'm just going to do the same thing going down the cape. Just layer 1, and then we're going to add more as we go. Once layer 1 is done, move on to layer 2, just kind of faster, but I just cross-hatch the opposite way of the already existing lines. For the top part there, I kind of do the rest of the layers too, but it's not fully done yet, so that's fine. Once layer 1 is done, move on to layer 2, just kind of faster, but I just cross-hatch the opposite way of the already existing lines. Then I'll just do that for the rest of the cape. I won't lie, first time I tried using this method, I didn't really like it, but the more I practiced it, the more I started to like it. The more layers I added, the better it looked, and yeah, I still gotta refine some stuff, but for now, I'll just keep it how it is now. So now that the first few layers of the cape are done, we're actually gonna move on to the armor. So I shade the armor sort of the same way I shade the cape, but I just add a few changes to, you know, how I shade. For example, I still do the curved lines for the bend in the armor, but I just add straight lines to where those curves end. I don't really make the straight lines fully across the curved ones because it just gives them a more metallic look, in my opinion. They would look weird if it fully crossed, so I just don't do it. There really isn't that much to say about the armor. Shading the skin, however, is very different. Well, not really, but it is. Really don't want to press too hard with a dipping pen when doing shadows on a face, unless it's like a close-up or a dramatic panel or whatever. Usually you want to keep the shading pretty light for the skin. Now if you want a darker skin tone overall, it might be a little more difficult to do with a dipping pen. I mean, manga artists usually just use screen tones for darker skin. Casca, for example, from Berserk. I really don't have any experience with screen tones, so I don't really know how to use them. But I'm going to keep it pretty simple for these two characters. You want to remember where your light source is, and shade where you think the shadows would hit on the skin. For me, it would be on the right side of the character, since my light source is on the left. You can use cross-hatching on faces, but I would recommend not doing that, unless whatever you're drawing is like a close-up of the character's face. I do slightly cross-hatch his face here, though. I also cross-hatch the arms too, since some places on the arm would be darker due to like the amount of shadow being cast from the armor. You want to just keep the shading light if you're using a Gpen. You could always shade with screen tones too, but I would still recommend adding some hatching to it. It's really up to you, whatever you want, to be honest. I also forgot to mention this earlier. When shading, you want to do quick strokes for hatching and cross-hatching, because I found out when I slowly hatch stuff, I would mess it up either by moving my hand the wrong way or pressing too hard on the paper, and which would like move the paper. So I just want to mention that. I also just end up shading a few more armor parts, but it's really simple hatching and outlining, so I'm not really going to go into it. And we're just going to shade the same way we did for the other character's skin, just one layer at a time. Now that that's done, we're going to go back to the cape. Now I like to use a brush pen for where the darkest parts, like on the cape are, and then just cross-hatch or near it just to blend in. That's what we're going to do. I usually outline the bottom or the edge of where I think it'll be the darkest, and then I'll use a brush pen to start to blend. Then all I do after that is just cross-hatch until I like how it looks. Pretty much it. Pretty much the same thing for the inside of the cape too. The only thing I change is that I make the cross-hatching even darker, since, you know, light wouldn't really be hitting it. The only reason I cross-hatch the bottom of the cape at all is because light reflects. The bottom could feel it up slightly for like the ground. It also just looks better than plain black, so that's another reason I crosshatch it. The next clip of me is really just shading a whole bunch of random stuff using the same methods I've already talked about, so I'm just going to fast forward a bit. It's pretty much the whole drawing, yeah, I already explained my shading method, so this is really just me using it in different parts. But it's all the same for the character's clothes and armor. Simple cross-hatching and blending with a brush pen here and there. I really don't change anything or use any new cross-hatching methods for the rest of the drawing other than like the hair, which I'll talk about. For this guy's hair, it's pretty simple. I start by making most of the outside strands completely black and then adding more white the farther I go in, like towards the middle of the head. I might end up changing the style of shading for the hair eventually, I don't know. I'll probably just stick with this for now. It's really nothing too crazy, pretty simple shading. We're going to finish this drawing by shading the two swords. Now I didn't know if I wanted to shade the katana like how it was, or if I should use like those wave designs on the edge. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then I'll show you. So on a katana blade there are usually these waves that go all the way down along the sharp part of the sword. This is called the hamon. The hamon, I don't really know how to say it. And it's made by putting down clay on the blade before heat treatment. The clay acts as like an insulator, which slows down the cooling cycle. The difference in cooling creates that difference in color and the hardness on the blade. Why did I just go into how a hamon is created? I don't know. So anyway, I decided to draw it, and then I used my shear size hamon as a reference. I was also erasing, when I tried to brush the eraser crumbs off the paper, well, this happened. So yeah, I wasn't too happy about that. I also added a fuller to the sword in the drawing, because why not? The fuller is an indent that runs down the blade, making it lighter and easier to use. My shear side doesn't have one. I just wanted to add it, because, yeah. The shading of the katana is actually just really simple. I'm just gonna fast forward again. It's literally just lines next to each other. There's really no cross-hatching or anything. Anyway, I just shaded the left guy's sword the same way I shade the armor, except I only use straight lines this time instead of curves, since, you know, the guard doesn't curve. It would just be straight metal. I also added a fuller to his sword as well. It's just simple hatching from here all the way down the blade. I just fixed up anything that I might have missed and add some more shadows to the character on the right. That's really about it. And that about wraps up this video. I do have a few things to say before I end this video. One, I am so sorry this took so long to release. I know you guys have been waiting like a while, like I said in the beginning of the video. So I'm sorry about that. Two, I hope this video helped. Now, I know it's about how I personally shade and not how Berserk Vagabond is shaded. I'll probably make a video on Berserk shading style sometime, since I know more about that than I do Vagabonds. You know, I only drew it for 2 years. So I hope this video helped. If not, I don't know. I'm sorry I just wasted 30 minutes of your life. 3, I'm sorry about the lack of, well, everything lately. Working on this video a lot, and I've been working on the manga a lot too, so I haven't really been able to stream anything, or post anything really, so yeah, sorry about that. And 4, last one I promise, my wrist is better. I went to a hand specialist like 2 weeks ago, and I got a shot in my wrist, which pretty much fixed it immediately. So I really wish I went there sooner, instead of waiting a whole month and a half to see if the pain would go away, which it didn't. So yeah, now I can get back to drawing a lot more, which is good. And yeah, that's about it. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye!